Welcome to Lesson 2, Garry Owen Tune Workshop. In this lesson we're tackling a little wee chunk, but we're going to tack it on to what we worked on in Lesson 1. So this little chunk we're working on here. So a nice short little chunk for you, but we're adding it to what we did in Lesson 1. So that's what we're going to work on in this lesson. And again, you can get all the lessons and the sheet music. I have highlighted the different little chunks I work on in each lesson for you in the link below. And if these lessons are helpful, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, let me know in the comments below. So we'll talk about the tacking on Lesson 1 to this little chunk, but let's start with this little chunk first. So we're coming off of the low A, so our low A position, bottom pinky finger is up off the hole, and we're going to transition up to C. So when we do that transition, that pinky finger has to drop, the middle two fingers come up, and you could, if you're not doing grace notes, you're just simply doing that transition. If you're doing grace notes, you want to do a G grace note here. We're going to lift the top finger of the top hand, and that top finger lifts, then you do the note transition, then that top finger comes down. And then we have a case where we have 3 C notes in a row, and you'll see that in the sheet music that I've provided. I got a nice highlighted blue section. So we have 3 C notes in a row here. For the bagpipes, it's a continuous sound. Unlike the practice chanter, we can start and stop. We can't do that on the bagpipes. It's just a continuous flow of air. So we have to separate those notes a different way, and that's what we use embellishments for. So even if you're not doing embellishments, not comfortable with them yet, I'm going to give you 2 very easy ones to start on. The first one is a C strike. So we're on the C. Our C strike is dropping down the middle 2 fingers to cover the hole and popping right back up again. And they're just really like, boom, they're on the hole, they're off the hole. So that's our C strike. So all together so far we're from low A up to C. You can use the G grace note if you'd like, and then you have the C strike. So that's what we got so far, and then if you want to do more for an embellishment there, we'll talk about the torluath in a moment. However, let's just continue with the easy version of separating these 3 C notes, and the next way to separate the second C from the third C is just a grace note. And top finger of the top hand, we're not transitioning anywhere, we're just holding on to that same C. So that's what I talk about, an easy grace note, because we're not transitioning different notes with the bottom hand, we're just holding on to that C up and down with the top finger of the top hand. So altogether, the easy version of this little chunk from the low A up to C, without the grace note, and then we'll do the strike, and then we'll do the grace note hanging on the C. That's the easy version. I'll play for you a couple times that easy version. And then that second C, after the C strike, that C is quite short. So we do our strike, and it's not very long before we do that grace note. So you hear that, we have that low A long C strikes, and then the grace note is happening pretty quick after. So it's long, short, long. So that's the timing of that little chunk. The timing will fall into place a little bit easier as we add it into Lesson 1, but first let's just talk about if you want to expand your finger repertoire with embellishments and make your brain hurt just a little bit, let's talk about that torluath. So we've gone up to the C with the G grace note from the low A. So that torluath, we break it down into 2 parts. The first half of the torluath, we drop down to low G, and then we do a grace note top finger of the bottom hand, a D grace note. So that's the first half of the torluath. The second half of the torluath, we're already on the low G. We're going to do an E grace note, ring finger of the top hand, and that grace note is going to transition us up to, in this case, up to C. So we're at low G, that ring finger of the top hand lifts, we transition up to C, that ring finger comes down. And if we put both halves of that torluath together, we're on the C, low G, D grace note, low G, E grace note up to C. And then what's that little bit at the end? We have a doubling. We're not transitioning anywhere with this doubling, so it's an easier doubling. G grace note, top finger of the top hand, D grace note, top finger of the bottom hand. And again, that second C is really short, so after that crazy torluath, we're doing that doubling pretty quickly afterwards. Now, a little bit easier way, if you're like, okay, the C strike's too easy, the torluath's way too hard, a little bit easier option is to do a grip. So, to do a grip, we're doing the first half of the torluath, down a low G, D grace note, but then we don't do the E grace note up to C, we just pop up to C without any grace note transition there. So that's a little bit easier version, but not as easy as this strike. So a little bit of an in-between option for you. So you can see you still get that bit bigger low G sound. It still sounds a little bit more robust than just the simple strike, but a little bit easier to play. So those are some different options for that small chunk. But for timing, I'll play a couple times, adding this lesson 2 chunk into the lesson 1 chunk we worked on. And I'll try without embellishments first, and if my fingers sneak in extra ones, I'll apologize in advance. One more time, the non-embellished version. And again, we do have to do that C strike and grace note on the C to separate those C's. And here's a couple times with the embellished version for these first 2 chunks. And again, click on the link below if you want all these lessons, if you want to see the sheet music that I've highlighted to see, okay, where does one lesson start and the other end. It's all there for you below. And I hope to see you in lesson 3. So one more time or 2 more times here with the embellishments. Until lesson 3, happy piping!